Good evening, folks. I hope you're all very well. This is Fleet Week. For those of you watching live, you'll know that about 20 minutes ago, um, I had I was concluding a Money in the Bank review. If that is of interest to you, it'll be on the YouTube when this is done, actually, and then this will go up on YouTube after that. So, hopefully, some of you are back here to discuss professional wrestling. Let me just hang on a second. Stream manager, yes, that's what I need. All right, let's talk about professional wrestling. No, I don't want to hear myself. That'd be bad. Lord Corn Syrup subscribed. God bless. Thanks, pal. We appreciate you. I see JJ's here. I see, Double J's here, as well as JJ. I forgot branding there. I hope you guys are seeing and hearing me okay. Trying something different with connections. I don't drop out every 10 minutes. Tell me how it looks. It may look slightly worse, but let's see if I actually don't drop out. Because in which case, owned, honestly. I'll take that. I'll live with that. Let me tweet out a couple links. And let's get into it. It's a big week for AEW, right? Back over 1 million, which means they're actually doing good again. That's the official way of approaching this subject. Blood and Guts happened. Many grins all round. There was the Royal Rampage, which was actually genuinely interesting. There was even a Pure Rules match on the program known as AEW Dark. So, much to get into. Again, I apologise here, folks. I'm just trying. For some reason, Twitter is kicking the shit out of me. I mean, usually it kicks the shit out of me, but not to this degree on a sort of technical level. But I do have much to discuss, so let's get started. Now, here we go. Fleet Week. Let's get into Blood and Guts. This week was about Blood and Guts. There are other things that were worth talking about, and we will talk about them. But it was about Blood and Guts. Simple as that. And I think they did a wonderful job of building this. Not in maybe a conventional way where it was this kind of natural escalation within the angle. Instead, they kind of penciled in a month ago and filled the gap with, a few stops along the way in terms of. Sorry, I'm getting messages of myself here on the screen from pieces of shit out there, but I appreciate it, bro. I'll talk to you after. It was more of a. They booked it and then did other things. Like they did the hair angle, they did a bunch of other stuff, and I don't think it was one of those things where, again, it naturally built one like this, but I do think they did a nice job of there was such a degree of violence and anarchy in the arena, they didn't lose that kind of momentum, I don't think. I think they just kind of maintained and stuck the landing. The big thing that I think in terms of build was, firstly, I think this is a really smart television play. And I don't think it's something you can do really on any pay-per-view beyond the Forbidden Door, because Forbidden Door is not AEW versus AEW. It's more sort of these exhibition matches, and then you can do stuff alongside that. But from a television perspective, it packed one hell of a punch to have the post pay-per-view show have this kind of marquee match. Because, listen, I'm not here to do ratings analysis or any of that stuff. I don't really know anything about it. But I'm aware enough of the subject to know that post pay-per-view shows should perform well anyway. Pairing it with one of your biggest attractions was a pretty smart way of kind of getting some momentum back on that side of things. So I thought it was intelligent. I would like to say, I think this is the best job they've ever done in terms of building a show around one attraction. I actually don't even think there's a good comparison to make in that regard. I was really impressed by the way they did this. Blood and Guts was what the whole show was about. They constantly showed you the graphic. They constantly reminded you the whole visual was Blood and Guts. Obviously, partly that the double ring kind of speaks for itself, but even the apron and all the graphics, and what it didn't make for a big star-rating show. A lot of the undercard stuff was very light and didn't exhaust anyone, and kind of left the crowd fresh for Blood and Guts. It was very much traditional in that sense, which AEW generally isn't. I thought it was very impressive and showed a degree of restraint that they very, very rarely utilize. With that in mind, a video package, which I'm told that you can't put those on. People they break their television, put their foot through it. It worked. This one worked, and I thought it added gravity to the match. And I really did like the kind of conventional build in terms of this is what this show's about. You know, we're gonna have some other stuff. Obviously, it's a 2-hour block, and we'll get into the length of the match in a minute. But it was actually legitimately blood and guts rather than an episode of Dynamite main evented by blood and guts. So that's a big compliment for me personally. The way I like wrestling, I thought it was a really refreshing move from AEW. Now, on first watch, I had some issues with this match, and I kind of alluded to them on the review show. And I'll get into those more here. If you haven't read it yet, I do have a review on Wrestle Purist that I'm pretty proud of. That's kind of an extensive critical review. But there were some things with this match that when I watched the first time around frustrated me because I wanted it to be something else. And I'll talk about those here. So, firstly, the length for these matches. If you've watched me long enough, you know what I'm going to say. So I'm sorry I'm going to bore you. I am a firm believer that Blood and Guts, War Games, really the match beyond is not supposed to be a literal match beyond. To me, it's the conclusion. To me, the meat of the match is actually the hot tags and the heat and the hot tag and the heat and that constant cycle. To me, that's what the match is really about. In recent years with NXT and now with Blood and Guts both times, they have instead treated it like its own match. And it's this kind of dramatic extension that has its own body and own kind of arc, which I'll be honest, I just don't think is necessary. Just to be completely, I'll set my story in that regard. I'm not going to say it's wrong. Me personally, I don't think it's necessary. I think it stretches things thin. But I'll circle back. So that was one of the things that worried me when I was watching it live and kind of distracted me. I thought there was a little too much weaponry. I think there's a way to do it that's fun and kind of has a charm of gleeful violence. John Moxley is fabulous in that regard. He's great. Like he does stuff like tacks and glass, but he does it in such an organic way that you can kind of take it for what it is. I'm sorry, you can call me an old man. I'm never gonna love guys running in there with here I am with my trusty battle, barbed wire bat or my trusty kendo stick or whatever. I always find it to be a little bit kind of WWF hardcore matchy for me, and that's not the vibe I want from War Games. So that was the thing, and the third was the finish. Let me stress again: if you're watching this thinking, "Wow, Joe hated the match," I didn't. I'll circle back, but just hear me out. First watch, the finish, was very interesting in terms of what people want from professional wrestling. Because to me, it was too theatrical. It was too showy. It was kind of phony. And it kind of took me out of it. Like you have this war zone and everyone's beating each other up and bleeding. And then they fight up to the top and like everyone else's controllers were disconnected and it was just left to the guys that the story was really about. And to me, that's not the idea of what a war game should be. It's not supposed to be perfect or pretty in terms of how the story ends. It's someone eventually just says, I can't take anymore, I quit. And you can go with the story from there. I'm always going to have an issue with guys escaping a cage because to me, the point of again, these are all philosophical things that I know are probably boring a lot of you, but it's just me. It's where I'm at with these matches. But I will say, the more I pondered this match and the more I watched it a couple of times, the more I appreciate it for what it was. I do not think it was perfect. Partly of that is circumstantial. Santana going down with an injury within seconds is just awful. And obviously, I mean, all love to that guy. I think you guys know how much I love him. And I hope he's okay. I hope he will be okay. And, I'm a big proponent of his, so hopefully he's good. Eddie Kingston seemed legitimately affected by his presumed back injury, is what he seemed to say, right? So there were things that were working against this match, and that's life. It is what it is. But I did think, while it's not a damning criticism, I didn't think it was perfect, and that's fine, nothing wrong with that. However, the more I thought about it, and the more I watched it, and the more I watched the audience's reaction to it, which is something that I do genuinely try to do. I try to think about this through the lens of the audience. I think that, this was probably the most effective way of doing this match in 2022. Divorcing it from what I want this to be, the more objectively I looked at it, I was like, this is actually in a lot of ways the right marriage of ideas. Why is that? What does that mean? Well, it was violent. And it didn't feel too reliant on stunts. Obviously, you had the big one at the end, but for the most part, it felt like guys going in there and fighting each other, and guys were scrapping, and it was rough and had an edge to it, which is what you want from this match. And that's what I like, you know? But I'm not deluded, and I'm realized that a lot of the War Games matches I love have finishes that a lot of, frankly, you guys wouldn't like, let alone the wider AEW audience. You know, I'm aware that Bobby Eaton getting hit with a wrench and kind of getting his arm pulled a little bit doesn't really do a lot for all of you. This was more to the current fans' taste. Now, why is that? Well, because, you know, there's a street fight every other week, there's a ladder match every other week. I think I need to get out of what I think War Games should be and accept for what it is. And for what I think it is in 2022, I think they did about a perfect job you can do, because it never felt to me like guys doing sequences or coming in and doing spots. It did feel like there was hatred there. It wasn't quite as chaotic and wild and unhinged as the Anarchy in the Arena match, which would never be topped in that regard. You can't top that. It's impossible. But this was smart in that it adjusted to the format and instead kind of gave you like blunt, almost discomforting violence. It was nowhere near as frenetic as its predecessor, and instead was a lot more kind of deliberate and brutal in that sense, I thought, which I actually think was a really nice adjustment, because with the War Games format, you can't have the same level of, you know, chaos that you had before. You can't. It's very much structured. It's a heat segment and a hot tag. With it, in some ways you can cut it and spin it, and they did have some creative spins on it with 12 guys. You know, Angelo Park came in and he ran away, and there was one where Jericho got cut off. I think it was straight away. So they were creative with it. But ultimately, it's still War Games. You can only, you know, do that so many different ways. So I've did a nice job of embracing the format for what it was. Again, do I think this match is enhanced by 10 minutes being shaved? I do. That's just me. But do I get that when you're doing a wrestling television main event and you want it to be special, you want it to fill up an hour? I get it. I understand. There's ad breaks too, which is part of why it was 3 minutes. If you noticed, there a lot of time they would go into the break. They would go into the break with an entrant, or they would come out of it one, which was part of the 3 minute thing. So to put a bow on what I'm saying here, and I apologize for the rambling, but Blood and Guts wasn't necessarily what I wanted it to be, but the more I watched it, the more I respected and admired what it was, because I thought it was actually a complete and utter success. The finish being the perfect example of that. The two headlines coming out of the match were Sammy's big bump, or three headlines: Sammy's big bump, the swing on top of the cage, and the big theatrical dramatic finish of Claudio getting the tap and Eddie Knott. All three of those didn't fit into my perfect ideal playbook for War Games, and with that comes a lesson for me as a wrestling fan, because that really worked. And ideally, War Games is a blow off. It's the end. It's final. It's complete. But for where this TV product's at right now, I do think there's a very real argument that the finish they did actually served them way better, because you have a hook there of sorts with Eddie and Claudio, you know? So I thought it was very, very effective. This is a great example of what I'm talking about. And Joe, I completely agree with Joe here, to be clear. He says this may be controversial, but I think starting with Claudio and Sammy was a mistake. It didn't start off with the heat it should have. I agree with that. They were the two guys who wasn't in the Anarchy match. Both late inserts of the program. There's not a lot of hate there. There's not a lot of heat there. It was more team competition than blood feud. But again, I had a very clear read on what I thought it should be, which I personally thought, and you know, I personally thought that Eddie should open the thing. But I understand if you're doing an hour, that maybe isn't the best idea, and I understand you wanted that big pop at the end. So it's a matter of preference in terms of what I wanted and what they gave us. But to conclude, I guess I really enjoyed it. I thought they did a remarkable job of filling, 50 minutes almost, and making it exciting throughout, and it's action packed, and it was a really fun watch. So I think that was a real feat considering the length. Chris Jericho's brain will always amaze me from a wrestling perspective. Because for everything I just said about how I thought it was kind of phony, the way that everyone was just watching them wrestle up there, and so on and so forth, it worked so well in terms of what they wanted it to do. Because it was the kind of finish that you can convince yourself was subtle, but really was everything but. And I don't mean that as an insult, it's wrestling. Don't overthink these things. Everyone got the finish. It was executed well, and it allows them to continue with their feud, which you will be, mileage may vary on Eddie and Jericho continuing, but I think that's what's happening, for better or worse. I actually haven't got a problem with it, um, but Jericho has he's very theatrical, and he's a big picture guy. And sometimes I roll my eyes at it, and if he'd have pitched it to me, I'd have said, "But it fucking works, man." A lot of the time. And people really were connected and attached to Chris and Eddie being up there fighting. And while it wasn't the most organic thing, I think it was very dramatic and very, very effective. So I really like Blood and Guts. I thought they did a great job. I think it was better than the first one. I actually thought that some of the first ones, like pre-match Beyond, was in some ways as good, maybe even stronger when Dax was in there leaking and Cash. They were great in that match, FTR. But as an overall package, this felt a lot stronger, and a big part of that was the dynamic at play. Eddie Kingston, while he was slightly hamstrung by an injury he sustained pretty early in this thing, and while I wish he was in it for longer, he has really become an absolute force of nature in the sense that he's just so popular. I mean, honestly, startlingly so. He's the most popular guy in the whole promotion, and with that, there is so much you can do from a storytelling perspective. I mean, I recommend anyone go back and rewatch it. Watch the reaction when Jericho climbs up and he looks at the people as if so I'm going to go up and follow him. It's powerful stuff, man, and that's an investment you can't. Look, every wrestling booker would die for it. It's everything. When you have that, you have the people, and that was the story of this match. I think they had the people. It was a massive success, both commercially and from what I can gather critically. I think everyone's really liked it. The more that I remove it from what I wanted it to be, the more I like it too. I thought it was very, very good, especially considering they had to follow up Anarchy in the Arena, which was one of the most remarkable matches I have ever seen, quite frankly. So, a big thumbs up on Blood and Guts, and I understand my review may have seemed slightly backwards there, but I wanted to establish kind of. You've probably heard me talk about these matches too much for me to be like, yeah, it was great, and not discuss those. There's some things in this match that, for me, cutting room floor, brother, but I've always tried to notice what the audience thinks, and they had a blast. So there you go. And ultimately, I did too. So that was Blood and Guts. Quickly, I want to shout out some people in the chat who bring up some absolutely astute points. Garcia is a great wrestler. He was wonderful in this. And Moxley, he came at the perfect time. It was just going a little flat for me. And in comes Moxley with that absolute penchant for violence that he has. He's a wonderful presence, a true top guy. So, yeah, everyone did great. All right, let's move forward here. So it's else on diet. Before I do, the audience likes Adam Cole, Joe. Listen, the day you hear me say that they shouldn't push Adam Cole, I would have been owned, but I have no problem in pushing him. I enjoy things as much as I enjoy them, but I always try to keep it in mind. It's important. Anyone who does this thing while like having their blinders on, very dangerous, What we got here? Tommy McCarby. Tommy Maccabee. One or the other. I'm sorry, pal. I probably messed up your name. He followed. We appreciate you, Tommy. Raw F Showtime. I know, good brother. He followed. And so did Matty frickin' C. Who else? These are both Twitter pals of mine, I'm pretty sure. So, thanks, guys. Hope you're enjoying the show. All right. Blood and Guts. Very good. I want to talk about the opener. Orange Cassidy and Ethan Page. This was an interesting match in terms of it came out of nowhere. The explanation was that Lambert wanted to, fight a fake wrestler or whatever the fuck. Whatever. It was a way to feature Orange. I said last week, one of the big segments last week was about Orange Cassidy, and I think he's going to be a big player this summer. I really believe that. We didn't get the entrance on Sunday. We got it here on Wednesday. The new entrance, that is. He's been back now, a week. He wrestled 4 matches in his first 7 days, about 9 days if you count when Rampage aired, which I think gives you an idea of what I was kind of alluding to. I think, you know, they're aware of their situation in terms of star power, and Orange is going to help in that regard. This was an interesting match. I liked it a lot. It was a smart match and a fun match, which are the words I would have assumed it would be. So it basically was about what I expected. They obviously built it around the body slam and had a lot of fun with the WrestleMania 3 elements. I want to talk about Ethan Page a little bit, though, who I'm not here to do a big drama show. I think a lot of you know I'm a big Ethan Page fan, have been for some time. And I am aware that he does not jump off the page the way that some of these guys do. I'm aware he's not quite as dynamic as some of these guys. However, I want to explore his usage a little bit. Not too much, but a little bit. So I could be wrong on this, and if I am, tell me, because I don't do these things in great detail. I'm just one guy here, but I think this is right. Ethan Page, from what I can gather, is 2-7 in TV singles matches. And he won the first 2. It was Lee Johnson and I believe Bronson, I think it was. He hit him in the dick, you may remember. So that means the last 7 he has lost. I remember there was a match with Cody. There was obviously the coffin match with Darby, Christian Cage. There was one recently with Miro. And I get it. He's a very, capable heel who can get his heat back easily. And, some of those losses have been kind of protected by Lambert shenanigans, so on and so forth. But I do think from a television perspective, when you're coming up on a year without a TV win, in a singles match, again, to be clear, because I think they've picked up some tag wins against Jericho and Co. when the American top team thing was happening. I think you need just a little protection on that front. That's me. Now, here's the thing. You could just as easily argue that's just who he is on this roster. I don't agree, personally. I actually think he has quite a bit to offer. But you will be very, I think the people will be very divided on that. So I guess I say all this to say, if this is who he is on this roster, maybe that's just, that is what he is and it's something to accept. But when I look at the heel depth chart, which I have in front of me here, this is my own personal recordings. These may not be true, but here's what I've got. These are active wrestlers, folks. Jericho, Christian, Malachi. I have Andrade at the 4 seed. Now, Andrade is not even hardly on the show. Sammy, Brody King, Scorp Sky, Daniel Garcia, Jay Lethal, and then I have Ethan/Lance Archer. Now, in fear of being dismissive of any of these gentlemen, because many of them are good talents, there are very few names on that list that I would say have been presented in a fashion that is inconceivable that Ethan Page could leapfrog them. He's a good promo who has good matches. I think there is something to be said for Ethan getting something to really sink his teeth into here, coming up shortly. I think it may come when Scorp drops his belt next Wednesday, which I think he will. But we shall see. I want to talk about it quickly because I was thinking about his TV usage and I was kind of thinking, I feel like I haven't seen Ethan win in a while. Indeed, I haven't. So, there you go. I agree with this. He's an all-rounder in a way that I think makes him stand out less. I think this has been a problem for Ethan in AEW. I do think he's been one note in a way that I actually think he's better than as a talent, but I think he certainly has fallen into the trap of that on AEW TV. So there you go. I thought it would be a topic though to mention because it does kind of feel like he's at the line now where it's like if he can, at this point, it's like if he loses again on TV in the next month, it sure feels like you can resign and you kind of hope he's going to move up from that for a while. It feels like that's who he is. So we'll see. I mean, it'll be interesting. But I agree with this. Him and Darby was a great feud. All right. Raw F Showtime, aforementioned good brother, has subscribed with Prime. Thanks, pal. We appreciate it. Okay. That was the opener of Dynamite. That was the main event of Dynamite. A couple other things. Spooky Luchasaurus is here. You get what you get, I suppose. I'm actually very happy about this move. I know there was some pushback when we would discuss Jurassic Express, and I know a lot of people like them as a team. But frankly, I think I'd seen those guys team up enough for a lifetime. I mean, they were a good team. They had a good tag title reign in terms of matches, not particularly in terms of compelling angles or stories. But, you know, the formula was so rigid in the sense that you could only do so much with that particular pairing. And, you know, I'm ready to see Jungle Boy be a singles. The question that always came with that comment was, what do you do with Luchasaurus? Well, many, many months ago, and I promise I'm not doing a bit because I think it was my idea. Someone in the chat, I believe, said that when they do the turn, he should be Christian's heater. And this was legitimately, this was like November. This was very, very long ago because this was before we have a new patron. It was Matty, I believe. Thank you, Matty. I shouldn't have said that publicly. Maybe you're ashamed of being a patron. Maybe I shouldn't have announced that so loudly. I'm just messing you. Thank you. So, Luchasaurus, as a heel heater, is about the best thing you can do with him without Jungle Boy. He's obviously got a clear ceiling. He ain't going to wrestle much. Squash matches and tags with Christian. That'll do you just fine. So, I liked it. It was effective. I think you should probably change his name. Is that crazy? I don't know. Maybe that's a hot take, but like, he's still called Luchasaurus, which pop. But you know, I've always a good idea, and I like the idea of actually letting Jungle Boy be a full-time singles. So I'm looking forward to when he's back and we get this program underway. Thank you, mate. I appreciate you. So yeah, this Layla Gray business was pretty fun, right? When I first, when I was watching live, I didn't see this. I was out of the room and it ended so quickly, I didn't see any of it. But when I read what happened, I was kind of like, it was a swerve. Like she let Jade beat her so that she could join the group. It was all planned. And then when I saw it, I actually thought the way they did it was really smart. Where basically Stokely on the fly adjusted, being who he is, and like made a move, and Jade wasn't even in on it or wasn't aware of what was going on, and kind of dismissed it, which I thought was smart. I like the way they did that. I don't know a lot about Layla. I'm told good things. I've seen very little, frankly. But I think it's obviously a big role for her. Hopefully Red Velvet back soon. I don't know what the situation is there, but hopefully she's back soon. But for now, I mean, this is a hell of a spot to be in. The baddies are a featured act, and they're an awesome act, honestly. So I like the way they did it. I will say, little thing, I'm ready to do the Athena match. Sometimes I think Tony can be prone to waiting on something that doesn't need waiting for. I don't think Athena is beating Jade. I think Chris is. So with that in mind, I'm kind of intrigued what actually is they're waiting for. And, by that I mean, in some ways, from a television perspective, it would have been awful nice to have Jade versus Athena on this show to really give the women's division a nice featured match on a major show. Clearly, from a ratings perspective, they didn't need to because they did great, but I don't know. I think Jade's like a really, she's become a really polished act, not a polished wrestler yet, but she can't be. She's only 18 months in. But it's hard for me to be particularly interested by squash matches like this, That's the only thing. So I'm kind of ready to move into this, to one of these matches. So I think you do the Athena match first, Jade wins, and then you do the Chris match, and I assume Chris wins. And maybe within that I find my answer, which is that probably, as I look at the calendar in front of me here, All Out is the 4th, right? So you're probably going to do the Athena match at the end of July, early August. Then Chris wins it All Out. That would be my assumption. So maybe that's what they're waiting for. If so, give me some tags and multi matches along the way, multi tags. Come on, give me some Athena wrestling matches on TV. I know she had a squash on Dark, but she's been there for a month now. Let's get this thing moving a little bit. But that's just me. I like the angle they did. Good for Layla Gray. Nice spot for her. All right. I mentioned Athena's squash match. That was on Dark from Universal. Our pal JJ was there, which is slightly incriminating. I have to say those crowds are, they're increasingly excited. They get very into the show. It's definitely a thing that happens. Rowdy crowds they have down there. But Dark was interesting this week because there's a couple of talking points. I want to get into them. Main event of the show was both a title match as well as an angle. Wheeler Yuta defended his pure title, I guess. Why did I say pure title, which has pure rules, against Tony Nese, which is nice. These are the kind of matches I think the C show should actually have a lot of. I think they're kind of too safe for those, frankly. This is. I don't co-sign the end of this, but the roster being light is noticeable. This match was a really good example of why a pal like JJ struggles with pure rules. And I love it, but we'll get into it. Before I do, though, I want to give some love to you. Got a really nice pre-match promo on this show. He actually had a pretty cool task, and this is the kind of exercise that I think these shows are really useful for. Where basically they knew this match was going to be the Dark before. It felt like anyway. And he cut a promo that was like, you're looking ahead to Blood and Guts, but first you have this title match. And I thought he did a really good job. And that's a pretty challenging promo. You know, he gave Wednesday some gravity and he gave it some punch, but he didn't dismiss Tony Nese and he made his belt feel important. So I thought that was a very positive step for Wheeler, who I haven't seen much of as a promo. I remember him being slightly stilted in a couple of those pre-tapes with Trent back in the day, but you know, I thought he did a really good job here. And that's an important part of the game. Look, AEW, there's a lot of great wrestlers. Yuta has the Blackpool Combat Club that makes him different, but as a singular talent, it would be really helpful if he could add promo to his game, you know. So this is something he may already have it for all we know. So big positive in that sense. Okay. Now, I agree with this totally. I like the act with Nese and Smart Mark. Really useful underneath heel. But this match was a really kind of perfect encapsulation of the pure rules for good and bad. I like the match, fine enough. It was they used the stipulation as often it is used, which is in a kind of overbearing way, but they had some neat stuff and vaguely creative stuff, and they made sure of using it, which I do think is important, but I think is a slippery slope. But it was hard for me not to watch this match and think to myself, man, they'd have had a better match if they just had a wrestling match, you know? And sometimes what Pure Rules does is guys get so desperate to work it into their structure and their ideas that they actually end up wrestling like just a blank slate, you know? Like, meaning that Tony Nese and Wheeler Yuta were simply the participants playing out this very familiar Pure Rules story, rather than it being a very Tony Nese performance or a very Wheeler Yuta performance. They were just guys doing the Pure Rules things, you know. One guy, the heel gets the advantage on the rope break thing. The babyface burns his, you know, and it's like it lacked the flavor that both guys can bring, which is a shame because I think if we all agree that Tony Nese and Wheeler Yuta, they can have a very strong modern match. You know, they can have a very exciting match. This wasn't particularly exciting. It was logical and well executed, but I think it was a good example of where pure rules can be limiting. Speaking of such, afterwards they shot an angle with Garcia and 2.0 for that matter. Came down and put the boots to Yuta, and Garcia held the belt up, and we believe the assumption is that his death before dishonor, which I'll talk about again in a second. But I'm very intrigued what they do with that rule set. Garcia is much better suited to it than Nese, and frankly, I think he's better suited than Yuta for that matter. But it'll be interesting what kind of match they produce, because I think we all agree that if they just had a wrestling match on Dynamite next week, the ceiling would be very, very high for that. Whether the ceiling is as high with pure rules, I guess we'll find out. So there you go. If you were interested, though, it is worth checking out. It's a nice little match, and Yuta's promo is good too. So we'll be staying with Dark. Hold 1 second. Slightly sore throat, so I apologize if I sound like shit, but you get what you get, I suppose. Julia. Young Julia Hart was here. She had a squash match. I believe this was her first match as Spooky Julia. Am I wrong on that? I don't know. But I believe so. The presentation here was very funny. I don't think that was the intention. But I do not know if Universal is the place for the kind of the ideal pomp and circumstance that you give them House of Black. It's very difficult to give it that kind of punch from a visual perspective. They struggled in that regard, but nonetheless, um, by contrast, Julia is absolutely someone who should be resting in this setting very regularly. So you kind of have to. I think you have to sacrifice the entrance, and who cares, right? Ultimately, because it's very important. I think she gets reps in front of this crowd. Um, this was not a long match or anything, but let me tell you, folks, I'm not even trying to do a bit here. Seriously, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's going to take you a couple minutes. It is noticeable how much she's like truly embracing the role. It is noticeable how much she's trying and honestly kind of succeeding at working with an edge, which is a real challenge considering how she was introduced as like the smiling cheerleader. She was intense, she was aggressive, she was on it, man. It was on, like I'm not trying to overstate it. It was a squash match, but genuinely, go watch it and tell me I'm wrong. She was fucking locked in, and that's important because look at who's on that team, right on that squad. Malachi, Brody, and Buddy. Those dudes are savages, man. Everything those dudes do looks intense and fiery, physical. And Julia like has a challenge in that regard. Someone that experience level, try to do stuff with real pop and explosion. It's difficult, right? Like she's just trying to get her fundamentals down. She did it well in this squash match. And again, that doesn't mean she needs to be the world champ. I'm aware. But I thought she did a really good job of working with like a genuine fire from a heel perspective. So impressed, legitimately. So I thought I'd mention that. A couple other notes from Dark I thought were vaguely interesting. Willow won, which I think kind of continues to lead to the kind of growing assumption that she's part of the AEW galaxy, as a couple sports entertainers called it. Whether it be Ring of Honor or AEW, I think she's going to be someone you can kind of get used to seeing around. So, speaking of such, Arya Davari won. He beat Caleb Conley, which is a strange match and a hilarious match, but it happened. Davari recently was doing a tryout for WWE as an agent, and I believe the day after one of those shows, he worked this and he got a win. So maybe he's sticking around. He's never been a guy who jumped off the page for me, but he's certainly a good wrestler, or a very kind of fundamentally sound wrestler. He kind of flirted with a gimmick that I think could have been pretty effective in 205 Live when he had the cool clothes and the car. That was not the show to experiment it with because no one gave a fuck, unfortunately. So he didn't really get much backing in terms of presentation. But maybe he's a guy who, again, they're penciling in for Ring of Honor. I don't know, but him winning feels telling in some way. Speaking of such, Jake Summit lost to Matt Sydal and had a pretty nice match. I really am quite high on him. I think Jake Summit is someone who, based on what he can do and what he showed in these very brief acts, I think he's someone you may see stick around. So, a couple other notes from Dark there. It was actually relatively eventful, even though there wasn't much from like a match perspective. But honestly, that's not the point of the show, right? So, there you go. There you go. You got the car entrance in a 2019 pay-per-view match. There you go. This is Rampage, baby. Rampage is all about the Royal Rampage. The Royal Rampage, of course, being a way to use the two rings while they're up, because fuck it, we might as well. This is intriguing because we did many segments of the Grim where we talked about AEW's own Royal Rumble, which, while this isn't that, it's called the Royal Rampage. So, I mean, kind of is, right? I mean, it's I don't think it's a stretch for me to have that reaction to it. So it's two rings, and you get assigned a ring. I have to commend AEW for absolutely not making an attempt to make the rings different. So they just said blue and red, and you just had to be like, yeah, that's red, man. Can't you tell? They both look exactly the same, but there you go. But I have to say, I really like this actually, and I don't know if that's a hot take. I haven't actually seen many opinions about this, but I really liked it. it's different enough to be theirs, but in a very AEW fashion, is paying homage to two different things because while it is called the Royal Rampage, it also is obviously going to remind fucking dorks like me of World War Three because you have the multiple rings set up. Not quite three, but you have two. So it's kind of a blend of those. I will say it to do it perfectly, like to do it as like a big time match rather than just a cool thing you announced on the week of. You probably need a level of agent in they have not quite yet come to grips with. There was actually a pretty good effort for the most part of keeping one ring relatively quiet while the other one did important stuff. There was one moment where they completely lost their way in that regard, where like something happened in the other ring, and meanwhile Keith and Hobbs were both eliminated at the same time, and it was kind of lost in the moment. Like you could tell the announcer and the audience didn't really know what to do with it because they were focusing elsewhere. It's very hard to produce in that regard. So I actually thought they did a pretty good job. Considering, I think if this was live, to be quite frank with you guys, this could have been a catastrophe based on what we've seen in the past. But I really liked it. I thought it was much better than the last Casino Battle Royale, honestly. And best of all, the finish, which I think was a very daring, bold move that hopefully it becomes the kind of the norm moving forward, which I'll get into in more in a second. Before we talk about who won, with Brody, I loved the drama of when it came down to the last two. The kind of the way the crowd came up when Brody crossed rings and was, seized on the situation. I really like that. That was a sense this format can work. Brody King is a really fun choice. So Brody is a guy he's had one singles match in AEW, which was a squash win over Alex Reynolds, I believe on Long Island, I think it was, which I think went like a minute, maybe just shy of 2 minutes. So he's basically a guy who you've totally protected. He's hardly taken a bump, honestly. He's looked like a complete killer and a complete badass. And he's a really appealing stylistic matchup with Moxley. So he's a really nice blend of a guy who I don't think is, while he's not been on TV like an absolute, bunch, when he's been on, he's been protected. And he's someone who you can easily talk the kind of general AEW viewer into. But he's also not been overexposed and he hasn't lost on TV. Like he's a really nice mix of factors in that sense. I'm a big proponent in the idea that guys have got to lose, man. And I think it's absolutely inevitable that Brody's going to leave this match on Wednesday more over than he went in, which is what wrestling should be all about. It doesn't matter that he gets pinned or tapped out or choked out. He's going to leave it in a better spot than he ended. And I think hopefully with Moxley as champ, we see that kind of stuff from a title match. If we kind of did the first time, Moxley is very much like, he just wants to wrestle right now, man. I don't know if you can tell. But dude seems like he's handpicking it and saying, give me a match with him. So I'm looking forward to that. I really like it as a choice. And as a couple people in the chat have mentioned, it may well signal what is next in a more kind of long-term sense, because the Blackpool Combat Club, I think, are going to be out of the Jericho Eddie stuff. I think Jericho and Eddie are going to continue one-on-one. Again, your mileage may vary, but I think they are. And that leaves Blackpool Combat Club to move on to a potential feud with House of Black. Malachi Black versus John Moxley as a Quake on the Lake or a fight for the fallen main event. That's a big time match, a marquee match. So I think it's exciting stuff. But honestly, before we even get to that point, I'm absolutely all in on Brody and Moxley. Love the choice of a winner, and I like the match. A couple of things in that match actually before we move on. The Butcher and the Blade. That was interesting, right? There was a clear attempt made to re-emphasize the Butcher and the Blade. And I don't know how people feel about it. I loved them, and even I was kind of like, my God, when they threw Swerve out, I was like, Jesus, it's a little much. But it popped me. It honestly popped me. It was pretty damn neat the way they kind of emphasized that. Well, they're teaming up. Of course, they can beat all these singles wrestlers. I do have to say, Swerve's gimmick being that he's just an asshole, good stuff. Respect it. I too would be an arsehole in Battle Royals. His name is literally Swerve. You get what you get, I suppose. So I like what they did with Butcher and the Blade, even if at times it even stunned me. I think it's necessary. Joe brings out they need heel teams. Well, brothers, let's talk about that as I pull up my depth chart, which reads as follows: the Young Bucks, Team Taz, 2.0, the Gun Club, the Butcher and the Blade in the 5 seed. I ain't got the stats in front of me, I ain't got the numbers in front of me, but I have not feel like I've seen much of just straight up tag team Butcher and Blade in a while. So they need re-emphasizing, and I'm glad they did it here because ultimately this is a thing that isn't going to hurt Swerve or Takeshita getting thrown like that. So it was a good idea. I liked it. What's happened to Bub Matt? He has a shoulder injury. He's working kind of through it on C shows, but I don't think they're going to want to have him do like a big extensive singles match. He's a little banged up from what I can gather. That isn't me reporting, to be clear. It's like public information. So there you go. I thought it was noticeable that they've kind of realized they need a little help there. I mentioned Takeshita. He wasn't in this thing for a long time necessarily, but my God, he got this huge reaction, like this star reaction. And he came in and he went into this sequence with Swerve. And I say sequence, but it really wasn't even a sequence. He just came in and fucking did the deal where he hits the ropes 3 times and does his clothesline. And it's like, he is very unique in how impressive he can be doing very little. I don't say very little meaning that he's lazy. What I mean is he's so dynamic that him running the ropes and doing a clothesline is like a stand-up. Everyone gets off their feet for it, you know? He's something, man. He really is special. And I think he's obviously only been available kind of full-time for the next year or whatever it is for the last trip. I actually think he should be on the TV shows more. Oracle said it when he first started working. I think he did when it was with the Hangman match, I think. And Oracle said he's a guy they should try and get on the TV a lot because he adds something different. So hopefully, especially with Forbidden Door out the way where they probably want to lean more on like established guys on the AEW side, hopefully now as that kind of gets further in the distance, we get some kind of cool Takeshita usage. I would like them to circle back, honestly, to Lethal and Satnam being a dick to him and get him involved in the Joe thing. When Joe comes back, I'd love to see Joe team with Takeshita, you know? I think that'd be a really nice kind of rub for him and a nice easy night's work for Joe. So that would be a nice way to build the Death Before the Dishonor, which I'll get back to. But I'd like to see him in the Ring of Honor scene. Hopefully he gets a big match on that card. I think that'd be very cool. Okay. To be clear, the reason I didn't say the Acclaimed was because I think now they're officially baby faces to me, you know? Like, to me, the angle was like the completion. The angle on Wednesday was the completion of their baby faces, Gun Club, or heels to me. So they would obviously be above, the Gun Club. Okay. A couple other things. We just mentioned the tag team ranks, the Bucks up against Goto and Yoshihashi. I like that match. I actually was thinking about the kind of psychology behind the way they did it too, right? Like, rather than it being a title match, they did the thing where it was a title eliminator. And at first I was like, why? Just do a title match. And I understand the rankings. But I thought about it more and I was actually, it pops me that we're at a point now where the AEW audience absolutely buys that Goto and Yoshihashi could win more in a title eliminator than a title match, which is a weird kind of example of how the wrestling industry has like evolved, you know? It's like this weird layered psychology at this point. So I thought that was interesting. I like the match. I like Goto a lot, and Yoshihashi's just fine. But it sure felt like just an absolute exhibition of what the Bucks can do. They're very, very special. I mean, I know that there's still for some reason a lot of pushback and so on, whatever. But I find them to be honestly kind of staggering. I mean, Nick Jackson's like ability to go into like kind of this weird overdrive state where he can do anything is unbelievable. But Matt Jackson I thought was tremendous here too. The Bucks are just one of the greatest teams ever. So it's always fun to see them wrestle. It was great if you notice on Dynamite when they did their promo, they they said we're going to wrestle on Rampage, right? And the crowd's reaction was tremendous to that. Absolutely tremendous because it perfectly encapsulated the kind of vibe they bring, which is even though they're heels, and honestly at this point very loosely, they're dicks, but they're kind of um, people just love watching those dudes wrestle, man. It's very very noticeable. So it wasn't a blowaway match or anything. It wasn't a match you'll remember at the end of the Bucks' career, but it was a nice match and a very nice showcase reminder, I should say, of who those dudes are. So I like that. Nice way to use Goto and Yoshihashi too. Finally, cool to see on Rampage in the main event spot. Tony Storm, Nyla Rose. Um, it surprised me. I don't think that's talking out of turn. I think you guys mostly agree with me on that. It was kind of surprising, right? Um, I would have assumed, I agree with this actually. I would have assumed that a main event with the Bucks, to be honest. But I like this. I will say I wish Nyla had more television exposure leading in. She, of course, had the Rosa program a couple months ago, which was kind of snake bit. That first segment they did was all time bad, and Nyla was not involved in it at all. So I'm not pointing fingers. It was, unfortunately, the person standing alongside her at the time. This, I believe, from what I could see, was Nyla's 5th television match of the year, which kind of gives you an idea of what I'm, referring to. Nyla is someone who absolutely has enough credibility because the audience is aware she's been champ and she's been around, and she's kind of always on the periphery, outside looking in almost. But I think it'd be nice if she was like a more constant presence. And I think that's something they really struggle with in the women's division. Everything is very start stop. People kind of come and go, and I'm aware like it's good in some ways because you see variety and they don't, um, they don't overexpose people. But at the same time, it really makes it hard to build momentum, I think. And I actually think Nyla as a talent is more than up for being on TV regularly, because this has been a thing for a while, and it is absolutely true. Nyla is genuinely good promo. And the fact that we had to listen to Vicky when she would be on TV, Vicky would be with her, is like a real shame. And this would be my read on it too. Give me a couple matches a month. Constantly, I'm a firm believer, whoever it is, I truly think this. I just think pick your core. If Nyla's in it or she's not, that's fine. I think she should be in it because she had something different from an in-ring style. She can have different kinds of matches. But even if she's not, I just really believe that the way to go with the women's division at this point is just pick like the 8 women you really want to focus on and make sure they're actually on TV all the time. Now, when I say on TV, I do not mean 15-second pre-tapes, They're not that effective. I really believe that. I mean, out in front of the people, on the shows, if you asked a fan what they're doing right now, they would know what their feud is, what their story is. I think they really struggle with that. So hopefully that changes with Nyla soon. I think she's kind of proven herself. I like the match quite a bit. It was clearly tinkered with quite a bit in editing, but I think some of that stuff's time, and rather than like a kind of indictment of the match, I think a lot of it's timing issues and such. So, but it was nice. Tony is someone who we've discussed 101 times over. I like what Tony brings to the division. I think she's very, very useful as an upper, kind of upper tier babyface. And I think this is a perfect example of why people like her. They had a nice match. I liked it. Is Nyla the most well-rounded female talent they have? This is a really good question. Because, honestly, when you kind of think about the top women in the division, many of them, it's not a knock, I mean, it's just the way it is. Many of them are more like they have a specific strength, right? So, like, Jade is a star wrestler. Like, she has a really great presentation. Britt is more of a promo. I'm going to pull up the roster. I'm intrigued by this as a talking point. I'll also look at the chat in a second. Athena obviously is way more in ring. I don't think, while I liked her segment recently, I think Chris could be someone you call well-rounded quite yet. Sheeta is an interesting one. Jason says the same. Sheeta is actually like a really like strong promo. It kind of goes under the radar because people just refuse to believe that could be a thing, but it absolutely is. I've always kind of been on my own on this. I don't know where you guys stand. I actually like Rosa as a promo. I think, she had a cut in the screen a few that weren't like that happens. I genuinely think she's a good babyface promo. I think she's a good fiery promo. So she'd be up there for me. Ruby would be up there for me. Um, hmm. But yeah, there's not many that I would put alongside a Nyla in that regard. Certainly, she certainly can. She'd be better English than me. Absolutely. Um, Chris is quickly improving on the mic. So that top spot. My bad. Is hers soon, lad. I like the symmetry with Athena. I want to see if she can tap into her personality. I think you're absolutely right. I love Statlander regardless. I think she's one of the best talents they have. But yeah, as a promo, there's definitely good signs. That's interesting. I like that topic. Okay. Couple last things before we get out of here. If you missed the Money in the Bank review and you want to see it, it's airing on YouTube in 5 minutes. So as we wind down, next week, Moxley and Brody King, or this week, I guess now. I've kind of mentioned it. I'm very excited. That one's definitely the appeal to me of next week's show. Very excited for Moxley as a working champion. Hopefully they don't let the rankings get in their way and just do matches we want to see, because ultimately that's what wrestling's about, isn't it? So I'm looking forward to that. Wardlow and Scorpio is interesting. I want to get a quick poll of the chat. We have over 30 people in here. Wardlow or Scorpio? Who we got? Wardlow or Scorpio? Is it as simple as I think it is? Or are some of you actually picking Scorp? I'm intrigued. Before I get to that, Joe, did you see Peck's first out defense? I did, and Shoot and I were on because we both thought it was a bit that they were going to defend it around the world. But they are. I'm looking at the chat here. It appears we are leaning towards unanimous victor. Yeah, I agree with this. I asked because there's not. The reason I bring this up is there's not much discussion of this match. And the reason for that, I'm unsure of. Because I think partly it's because it's a formality, right? Like, we clearly, everyone in this chat and myself, thinks it's a formality Wardlow's going to win. So there's not really hype because it's like, let's just get to this, see what he does as champion. But I was wondering if it's because people think the stipulation's out. To me, and Shoots this on the grin, I think this stipulation is to protect Sculp in a way where you kind of have other bodies involved, right? He can beat the shit out of all the ATT guys. And it can be a plunder match and a smoke and mirrors match where Sculp basically survives for a long time. Not too long, but, it's a kind of a shenanigan heavy match. And that's why it's a street fight, I would assume. I don't think it's because Scorpio is going to take any crazy bumps. I think it's just more the case that it's going to be like as much a segment as it is a match. I think there's going to be a lot of bodies thrown Wardlow's way. The first match, from what I can recall, it was framed at one point as though Wardlow had him beat and dead to rights, and then they did the MJF run-in. But I think they may have been run-ins before that too. But I just, to me, it being a street fight suggests that they're going to kind of extend this with some shenanigans. So, like, as a good example, Raven and Goldberg, probably like a more kind of kind of elaborate version, maybe the word I'd use. I could see there being a lot of kind of stunt bumps and such in this. This is going to be an interesting thing, and this is where the All-Atlantic belt becomes, I think, more important. Like, it's going to be a challenge, man. I said it a lot before Double or Nothing, and like, I was very reluctant to make it a big talking point because I don't want to be that guy. But the Wardlow thing is more complex than people wanted to pretend before Double or Nothing, which was like, he's just going to kill everyone and be the champion forever. It's like, I think there are challenges ahead. This reign is going to be so important for him. Like, how these matches, perhaps squash matches, get over is going to decide what we do next with Wardlow. We meaning, I don't know who, because I'm not involved in the creative process, but decide what, the folks that are do next with Wardlow. Because if it gets over and he's fine doing that in like a Goldberg fashion, then I guess you keep moving. But if not, I think it could kind of backfire in some ways, to be quite honest with you. But that's just my opinion. I don't know. I feel like Wardlow's momentum was halted off Double Nothing. He needs a big win here to get him back on track. They screw him again, it could hurt him long term, I think. I agree. I definitely think more shenanigans here where he gets, screwed over, I think would hurt him. I agree. All right. Well, finally, Ring of Honor tag next week on Rampage. Gresham and Moriarty versus I've forgotten their name. I know it's Toa and Khan. I just don't remember their tag name. chat. What's their name? Both good talents, by the way, especially Khan. I'm a big fan. But that is next week, next Friday, Rampage. I bring that up because Gresham cut a pretty awesome promo, I thought, actually, on Rampage. An important Tully Blanchard Enterprise, but don't they have like a team name, Fred? I thought they had like a cool team name. I don't know. But yeah, Tully Blanchard Enterprises works. I like Gresham's promo on Rampage. I think it's very important he develops that part of his game. My guess, based on the fact that Cage isn't in the tag match, is that they're going to win and wrestle each other, but I could be completely wrong. Maybe Cage is going to wrestle him. I don't know. Triple threat, whatever. We have less than what we at now, like 3 more weeks of TV before the pay-per-view. So be interesting how they build this. When Joe will be back, I assume they'll want to have him back for the pay-per-view, right? I would guess. But we shall see. All right. That was Fleet Week. Gates of Agony. My God. The Gates of Agony. Pop. All right. This was Fleet Week. It was a week. Blood and guts centric, but there was a lot of interesting things this week. A strong week, I thought, for AEW, and honestly, what I thought they quietly kind of needed to hit the way it did. Forbidden Door was unbelievable, and they followed up with this week, and they come out of that a lot nicer than they went in. Honestly, next Dynamite should be very strong. A couple big title matches. You've also got the Thunderstorm tag. So, grins ahead. I hope you've enjoyed this, folks. If you're watching on Twitch, as I said, on YouTube right now, the Money in the Bank reviews airing with Oracle and Bobby and myself. So I appreciate you. I think I'm going to be on Wrestle Purist later tonight. So, follow the Twitter or whatever to know what's going on there. But tomorrow, I'm going to review Against All Odds. So I'll see you back here for that. Before then, Wrestle Purist, go to latenightgrin.com. If you would like to become a patron, just $1 gets you everything. You can always give us more if you would like to. $1 gets you in the door and gets you a see everything too. That means what? Well, the Late Night Grin every Friday night, which goes about 3 to 4 hours. Last week's episode was interesting. I would not recommend starting with that if you're new, but you get what you got, I suppose. And also The Burt, which is a morning solo show that I do from 10 a.m. for an hour, Tuesday through Friday, every single week. That's back on time now. So much going on behind the paywall. Much going on. Much going on in front of the paywall. Much going on at all times in professional wrestling. I hope you guys had a good weekend. Grins ahead as always. In the meantime, enjoy this outro. Wow.